Kicked off. Good afternoon. I'm Jen Leisure with the Quilt. So glad all of you are able to join us today. We're very pleased to have Jen Schopf here with us from the Texas Advanced Computing Center and of course EPIC. I think many of you already know Jen and her colleague Jason Zarowski from ESNet and the great work they've been doing over the last few years with our national community in providing EPIC resources, especially important as you are putting together or considering an NSF proposal in the Campus Cyber Infrastructure Program. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Jen. You see that the recording has been hit here. And please, throughout the course of the presentation, if you want to start by putting your questions in the chat, Jen, I'll keep track of those and let you know when we have those. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody coming. As we said, on a summer Monday, these are always really challenging to schedule. So, and for those of you who were here for the one of these we did for the prior deadline, not a lot has changed or shifted, but I'm happy to take questions throughout. Feel free to interrupt me. I can't see the chat while I'm looking at the screen, so Jen Leisure is going to chime in if you ask there, or I'm happy if people just want to speak up, just chime in. Right, so what you signed up for today, we're going to do a 2-minute overview of EPIC stuff. I'm going to talk at really high level about the current CC Star program and how it's a little bit different than the solicitation that came before. So not the last deadline, but the last two solicitations. And then I'm going to walk through how we can support some of the work that's going on here. So I'm going to show this every time with this picture, this cat. The cat pictures are mostly from Jason and used as wake-up calls because everybody knows Jason loves his cat pictures. Big note, preempt everything. The comments I'm going to make here during this talk are just my experience or our experience from EPIC. We've been supporting this program since it began, and in some ways, the CC Star program grew out of some campus network work that I supported when I was at NSF, when Kevin was on his detail at DHS, and we got the ARA stimulus funding. So we're really familiar with the program, but for any really in-depth specific questions, we highly recommend you talk to Kevin or one of the other program officers listed on the program. They are your Bible truth for anything out of this program. EPIC is just a resource, and we're going to tell you our best experience in working with this. So EPIC is, as Jen mentioned, is the Engagement and Performance Operations Center. We're an NSF funded program. We actually are funded from the CC Star program. So when the CC Star PIs meet, we go to those meetings because we're CC Star PIs. And what we do is we look at end-to-end data performance with a huge set of regional and infrastructure partners. Why was it started? It was started in part because today's science is collaborative science, as we all know, and sharing data is hard. Sharing data involves multiple sites and multiple partners and different places it can touch and all sorts of things that can go wrong, and no one entity is in control of all of it. So the thought was, if we could have some kind of operations center to help with this, we could help people move their data better, and helping people move their data better, we decrease the time to science and increase innovation. So we are currently supporting 5 different main activity focus areas. Roadside assistance and consulting, which is kind of like an Ask Me Anything. I've got, I think, one slide on that. Application deep dives, which is when we work with a science group in your IT department. Network analysis using a tool called NetSage. Something called baseline performance testing, where we've got known good endpoints, and you can see how long a transfer takes to a known good endpoint as you're trying to figure out how long your data transfer should take to your mystery endpoint. And we do a whole bunch of training, as many of you have experienced. Roadside assistance and consulting is the thing that I think we've become most known for. We've now done almost 250 of these since we started. You send an email to epic@tacuTexas.edu, and it can be almost anything. We triage them and share them across the whole team. We try to get back to you within 2 days, and we get questions everything from what's the performance I should expect between 2 sites to I'm looking at ordering a different top of rack switch. I'm considering these 3. What would you recommend? To, we've got some issues with perf sonar testing, and I'm not quite sure what we're doing wrong. Kind of just across the map, anything that you can ask. We write up the most common ones. We post them to fasterdataes.net, as well as our own website as well. So that's our 2 really super quick minutes in Epic. I should say, for those of you who are going to be at the PERC meeting next week, we've got an 1.5-hour session walking through all of those in a lot more detail. But today, I'm not really talking about Epic, I'm talking about the CC Star program. So let me do like 3-4 minutes on the CC Star program. The most recent iteration of this is NSF Campus Cyber Infrastructure 23.526. If you do a Google search on NSF 23.526, you'll come up with the current solicitation, or there's this link. This is a program that changes a little bit year to year. Every version has slightly different things and slightly different updates. This particular solicitation, it is incredibly important to read all of it, because there are details that are listed throughout. Even in the back part that you think is boilerplate, in this solicitation, it's not. In addition, the summary tables that are listed for the different areas don't always include all of the required elements like they say they do. And people have gotten bitten by that in the past. And if you don't meet all the requirements, they will return your proposal that you've just spent 3 months working on. They'll return it without review. And that's just crummy. That's a huge waste from everybody's point of view. The significant changes for this round, there were 2 deadlines, one this last March, one coming up in September. September 11th is a lot closer than you think. So if you're thinking about submitting in September, now is a really good time to make sure you've got your team together to start working on your outlines and your partnerships and figuring out what you want to do. A lot of people decided to not submit to the March deadline and pushed it off to September. So I think the September deadline is going to be really crowded. The other significant change for the 23 solicitation is it kind of combined all of the areas from the 21 solicitation and the 22 solicitation. So there's now 7 different areas, each with their own set of requirements. The anticipated funding level and number of awards changed. Back at the March deadline, they said the numbers listed on the solicitation were for March only. They did not have the September numbers yet. I've not heard otherwise from Kevin, but on the other hand, they're still trying to figure out the budget for next year. So I don't know that he'd have this information either. There's some addition and removal of restriction concerning who can apply. And there's a much broader emphasis in the solicitation on democratization of access, work with EPSCoR, broadening participations, rural work, that kind of aspect. So here are the 7 different areas listed. The first one is, data-driven networking infrastructure for a campus. So this is, if I'm at UT Austin could apply for this. The second is regional connectivity for small institutions. If, the UT system network wanted funding to work with the smaller institutions in the UT system, they could apply for this. The third category, network integration and applied innovation, that's more of an applied software one. So for example, if we had a funky new way of doing, automated work for a research network in some way, that could be part of this. 4 and 5 are the
in the room.
Hello? Uh-oh. Did you have a question?
I think that was someone that wasn't on mute, Jen. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, no worries. It sounded like a youngster. Hello, regional networking isn't that bad, really. So sections 4 and 5 are echo areas 1 and 2, except for campus compute. So an institution submits a number 4, a regional group would submit a number 5. Number 6 is for data storage, and number 7 is a planning grant. There's 2 different kinds of planning grants. So there's a bunch of similarities to previous times and a bunch of similarities across them. The biggest one is having a science and educational driven requirements. So all of these expect you to be able to enumerate in detail the science or education that will be able to be helped by whatever infrastructure upgrade you're requesting. They expect you to have partnerships across your campus and region. So for example, in my hypothetical example of the UT system applying for something, we would be expected to have a regional partnership with the other regional network of Texas, which is LEARN. And within a regional application, you'd be expected to have sign off from the CIOs of the different institutions you're working with. Each area, as I mentioned before, has a lot of requirements. Some are listed in the summary list, some aren't. So please double check those. We also require a campus CI plan for all of these different areas, and that gets a little weird for some of them. There's a couple different ways that you can write them depending on how you're going about it. There is no set campus CI plan. I've got a slide on this in a couple. And you're supposed to document your partnerships. This is done through what's called a letter of collaboration. Letter of collaboration, as opposed to a letter of support, needs to include what you're collaborating on. So it's not just a letter that says, hey, you know, Jen over here, she's pretty smart. She can do one of these. You should give her money. It's, I think Jen's pretty smart and I'm going to work with her on this project. And here's how we're working together. One of the advantages of this particular solicitation is you do not have to do the little tiny boilerplate NSF letter of collaboration. You can write a real letter, and Kevin Thompson has told us in the past he prefers those. So instead of having the boilerplate, you know, we'll work with the project according to how it's written up and it has, you know, that 2-sentence description, you can actually include details about what you're going to do together and why this collaboration will help the project. And that's a way of showing the strength of how you're working together. If your SRO's office argues otherwise, it is solicitation by solicitation, and that use of the 2 sentences is only recommended, not required in the GPG. And Kevin Thompson will actually give you an email that you can show your SRO if you have to argue that, because I know some of them are not super reasonable. All right, so that's the high level NSF program. Do read the whole solicitation to understand all of it, but I'll talk more about the solicitation also in how EPIC can help support you. So we have a website set up that can, with some of this in it, we can help you identify your science drivers. We can help review architecture exams, architectural designs. We can look at measurement and monitoring. We can point you to campus cyber infrastructure plans, et cetera. So for science drivers, this is one of the most important parts of the CC STAR solicitation that is different than a lot of other solicitations you may or may not be familiar with. You really should have science drivers that show you need whatever you're proposing. So some of the common missteps we've seen in the past is, for example, having a science driver that says, hey, we need more storage to do our science, but your proposal is looking at building a science DMZ. So those don't match up. So that's not going to be a very good story. And the review panel is going to say, well, you know, if your science driver says you need more storage, why aren't you doing more storage? Another one that we've seen a lot of is when someone with a network engineering background, for example, tries to max out the cool network engineering thing. So for example, proposing 100 gig DTN that their campus can use, but in the architectural diagram, it shows very clearly that all of the pieces connecting that are only a 10 gig or less. You know, we've actually found it to be much more effective to have several 10 gig DTNs and 100 gig DTN. And if you're going to propose 100 gig DTN or 100 gig per sonar node, you really need to show you've got the rest of the infrastructure to support it and have an extremely good science use case for why you need that. Right now, we're unfamiliar with any science driver that really needs 100 gig flow. Even the higher geophysicists coming from CERN are breaking their flows up into much smaller pieces. Another common misstep we see is the science drivers are too general. You say, well, we're going to support higher geophysics. Well, you know, everybody in networking supports higher geophysics, whether we want to or not. It's much more effective to say something like, we're supporting Dr. Smith's virus modeling project, and we're going to do it because, you know, Dr. Smith can't get the models that they need for class in time. So we're going to have a science DMZ to allow faster exchange of the data from the main source. Does that make sense? Maybe. Finding your science drivers can be kind of challenging because there's often silos between the research staff and the IT staff. We strongly recommend looking at your internal networking data and seeing where the large flows on your campus are going on and off and trying to drill down from there. You know, if you find out, you know, geology department is moving a lot of data from NCAR. You know, you've got that in-depth data, you've got those IP addresses, you can identify the lab and find the PI and say, hey, it looks like you're moving a lot of data from NCAR and it's not going very quickly. If we could upgrade the network to your department, you could get this kind of behavior instead. Would that help your science? You know, if you don't have access to that data, we found, you know, some people say, you know, contact the vice provost of research or your office of sponsored research. Some campuses don't have a vice president of research. Every campus has a strategic plan. Even little tiny ones will have strategic plans, and they'll have press releases when big science things happen or big data things happen or big educational things happen. And from that, you can figure out who might be moving data. You can look at who's getting grant money. You know, there's an NSF award search and an NIH award search that are both fairly easy to walk through, pull up your institution and see what's there. You can use NetSage if there's a NetSage deployment in your region. If there isn't one in your region, each of these may pick up some things from your institution. So like the NetSage sensor we have deployed at TACC, if anybody from your institution is sharing data with TACC, we'll see it. Even if you're at, say, Rutgers and we don't have a New Jersey-wide setup. And so there's a bunch of these. Note that all of the domestic NetSage deployments are now at, you know, projectname.netsage.io. They've all had to shift over because of an IP disagreement with its previous home. Okay, so you found some science drivers. Now you're looking at an architecture review. Most pieces of this solicitation require a specification of an infrastructure or diagrams. So that's more than just, I have a router here and a switch here and there's a link over there. You have to have some details about sizes and types. The biggest problem we see in this area, quite frankly, is especially smaller institutions will work with vendors. And vendors are going to tell you what they think you need, not what you really need. They're going to match, they're going to say, well, how much money are you going to get from this solicitation? And then magically they will have a quote that did exactly that dollar set. We've lost track of how many times we've seen vendors try to oversell people on an infrastructure that may or may not meet their needs. And in fact, when I was at NSF during, as I mentioned, during stimulus money from Obama, we had money for EPSCoR to upgrade. Every EPSCoR state could upgrade their network. We had $1 million per state. And several of the proposals came in, mostly written by vendors, that provably made the network worse because a vendor had been involved and had decided to do this. Not every vendor is like that, but it's something to be aware of. If you work with a data architecture review with Epic, one of the things we'll ask you straight off is, you know, tell us about your science drivers. Because then we can tell you, you know, are you thinking about the right components for things? You know, if you think about the science drivers as your use cases and what you're buying instead of a network, maybe you're buying a car, you know, I could tell somebody, well, you know, I'd really like the new Miata. You know, I really like the look of it. I like the sound of it. It's got, you know, it's all snazzy. And then you talk about my, you know, the equivalent of my science drivers is my life and my use case. And they say, well, you know, I have 200-pound dogs and a 17-year-old, and, you know, we go camping a bunch. And it's like, yeah, no, the Miata is not in your future. You know, let's talk, you know, SUV, let's talk, you know, something over on this line instead, right? Because of this mismatch of science drivers and actual infrastructure. So that's one of the things that you need to try to do is connect the how will this be used to what will be used, if that makes sense. You know, we get questions about security and intrusion detection systems. We collaborate very closely with Trusted CI and Jim Basney on this right now. They are also, this is their website. They're also open to this kind of question in the short term as needed. There is a note in the solicitation in some places that things like manners need to be included in your CI plan. So it's just trying to figure out the right place to work that in. And we can give you some examples of how that was done as well. Right. So this just says what I've already said is so things, for example, when you're right sizing a DTN, you know, what are your typical science needs? What's your data transfer like on the other side? What's your campus backbone support? And thinking about your metrics of success, right? So in the best world, you would be able to say for your proposal, I have, Chris Smith over here has this chemical modeling that they're doing. And if they could transfer their data 10 times faster, which we should be able to do with this proposed upgrade, they'll be able to get 4 more publications a year, or they'll be able to change from a 2D model to a 3D model. And here's how their science will change. So being able to directly tie that increased network, that increased infrastructure to some kind of increase in science. So part of this is understanding where your performance is today. So we offer this baseline testing support, as I mentioned. Part of it is showing what your performance is like afterwards. And in order to help that, we actually have a Viavi tester that we can loan out to different sites. It's currently sitting in my office at Austin, but it's in a Pelican case and we ship it to people all the time. Okay. Some of the components require you to have a measurement and monitoring plan. Not all of them, but some of them. So read through and see if you need this. At one point, several components of the solicitation required you to set up a persona node and call that the measurement and monitoring plan. That's no longer sufficient, simply having a persona node that isn't connected to anything and isn't doing anything. So if you're looking at this and you're not sure what to do, Epic can give you some advice on where you could test and what kind of persona nodes you might want to set up. We do a lot of work with the Persona Consortium. We're also, unlike some folks, not super positive on the 100 gig persona nodes, in part because you're never going to get 100 gig persona. Persona is supposed to look like what your average user is, and that's not going to be 100 gig flow. We found it much better to, for example, take the money from that and use it to buy 4 or 5 10 gig nodes, which you can then set in more places strategically. I've briefly mentioned this campus CI plan. This is actually a construct that was created just for this solicitation. Ideally, your campus would have a strategic plan talking about how they're going to grow their cyber infrastructure over time and how that fits into the vision of the campus overall. Almost no campus actually has one of these out of the box unless they've already applied to the CC Star program in the past. There is no agreed upon set of things that should go into it. There's no agreed upon formatting for it. We have been collecting up samples of various CI plans. They're available on this website here, fasterdata.es.net, campus CI planning. If you've recently received a CC Star award and would feel comfortable sharing your campus CI plan back with us, we would be very grateful for that. We post them up, and let people look at them. If you're in the process of developing it, we can certainly say, hey, for your setup, once we understand your setup, these 2 or 3 might be more relevant to what you're trying to do. We're not going to write this for you, but we can certainly post you to some examples that might be more or less relevant. One of the other changes that's happened this year is this change in eligibility. It used to be that certain components, like for example, for Area 1 for campus networking, it used to say any organization that's already received an Area 1 can't receive another one. That's been changed to if you received one in the past 5 years, you can't. So some of the people who did some of the early ones can now apply again. Similarly, the compute part that echoed this didn't used to have a constraint on it at all. And now it's saying if you've gotten one of these in the last 5 years, you have to wait. So looking at these changes in eligibility, also different areas, so all of them are open to higher education institutions. If you are a not-for-profit, you can apply for some, but not for others as the PI. You can generally be a co-PI or receive a sub-award for all of the different sections, but look over the solicitation very carefully to make sure that you're eligible, because there's nothing worse than getting a great proposal from an organization that isn't eligible to apply for a certain area. You get returned on review. That's an NSF, dictate. The other thing to be careful about is what's included in the budget. And this varies a lot from area to area, with the exception of you're not allowed to have explicit cost sharing. So for example, some of you may be familiar with the MRI solicitation for major research infrastructure. That used to require a certain percentage of funding as cost sharing to show continued operation of the machine. That is explicitly not allowed in these. And different areas have things that are or aren't allowed. So for example, for the regional networking in area 2, it says non-networking equipment should not dominate the budget. What does that mean? You get to figure that out. It's a little bit fuzzy. It says if you have a DTN, it should be less than 15% of your overall budget. If you have compute resources, they should not be included as part of the funding unless they're integral to your DTN. Here's another example for area 5, where it says your staffing can only be up to 25% and you can't have software license fees. You could have software license fees in the other components though, because they're not unallowed. So this is very specifically area by area. One thing we do emphasize quite strongly is that your PI and your co-PIs should include time for project management. If you submit a budget where you're the PI, but you're not actually charging any time to the project, the review panel is going to look at that and say, well, how is this project going to be run? Because this person isn't going to have any time on it. Or this person only has 2% of their time on it. That's not going to be appropriate for a project of this size. So really think about how to weigh that and balance that.
Hey, Jen, may I interrupt you? We do have a question or a comment here in the chat, and it's back on CI plan. PL Thomas, if you want to unmute and ask your question and share the example, we'd appreciate it.
Sorry, I'm working on digging up the example, but it seems like every time I've applied for several of the CCI grants, I always get comments about my CAC, my plan not being right or this or the other. Doesn't seem to matter much. I've gotten 2 grants out of it, but everybody seems to have an opinion about what it should look like. And I was just curious about, do other people get the same feedback from their CCI plan that there's some things they don't like about it?
Yeah, so we have actually asked Kevin as both a group that supports people writing these grants and occasionally as groups that are writing these grants, can you give us more information about what you would like to see in a campus CI plan? And Kevin has historically said, but you all are welcome to do the same. To me, Kevin has historically said, yeah, it's underspecified for a reason. Include what you think is the most important aspects. So this is why we give you access to as many examples as we can. I would love to have some of your examples and the feedback if you're willing to share it, because I think that would be, it's really useful to the community to see this. We're kind of blind leading the blind on this because there isn't clear direction from higher up what should be included or not included. And yeah, that's crummy.
This seems odd that they pick at it from time to time when I apply for them, but yet they still accept it, still got the award. It seems like everybody has a slightly different view between one reviewer group and the other, and you have to switch back and forth, but you don't know what the reviewer is going to want, right?
So I will say that I believe how I've seen reviewers comment on the CI plans in the past. And if you look at this set of, I think there's probably over 20 of these now that we've got available online. They're all different. The outlines are all different. They definitely don't include the same things. They don't put the same emphasis in the same places. We'd started out an outline for what we thought was the most common pieces, and it wound up just being fruitless. That said, if you including one is the most important aspect. Including one that has complete sentences and has somewhat of a plan is the most important piece. We don't believe that panels are rejecting good proposals because their CI plan might not match up with the envisioned by a panel. And that sounds like it matches your experience where you got dinged on your CI plan, but you still managed to get an award.
Yep, that's true.
So I think this is one of those things where the act of creating a plan is as important as having the outcoming plan. Are there any other questions on this while I've backed up?
don't see any in the chat, Jen. I think we're okay to
Okay.
move ahead.
All right, so I'll pick back up. So it's talking about letters of collaboration. So you need letters of collaboration for, if you're working with different campuses, or with different parts of your own campus organization, you'll need the various groups to basically say, hey, yeah, we know about this and we're planning to work with you. Some of the areas, for example, say that you have to have a letter from your CIO saying that, or whoever your equivalent position at your institution might be. It turns out UT Austin doesn't have a CIO. And so we've joked about, if we were going to go for one of these, which we're not, who would we actually have sign off on this? Because there's like 3 or 4 competing offices. Epic is happy to write a letter of collaboration. We actually have a sample letter on the website. I think it still includes an IU reference in there. Everywhere you see IU, just replace it with TACC. But in general, what Epic can promise to do going forward, should you be awarded, is, we can continue to answer questions about your cyber infrastructure and data movement challenges. We can, we do training. Our training materials are open to everybody. We can offer to do presentations as part of your project support going forward as schedule and budget allows. We can participate in an advisory committee. If you're looking for a letter from us, we ask that you include a 1-page project summary. It doesn't have to be the final summary, but we need something saying what the project is so that we can say how we're going to collaborate with you. And because of the timing this year, we generally ask for a week's notice for these when they're due. These are due September 11th this year, and I'm actually going to be out of the country on the 11th. So we're asking to have things in basically just before Labor Day, because Labor Day is also in there to give us enough notice to write these. And that's kind of for any of your letters of collaboration, you're going to want to really have those lined up and completed by late August. I would not wait until September with Labor Day and other, class starts and other things happening. Because we get this question a bunch, who does Epic work with? Epic works with everybody. We work with anyone on anything roughly related to education or research. You don't have to be a partner. You don't have to, be anyone special. Everyone is welcome to send us an email. Everyone is welcome to say, hey, can you work with us on this project going forward? That's what we're funded by NSF to do. General timing wise, these proposals will take longer than you think and will be harder to write than you think, and herding your cats are going to be harder than you think. Your institution will also probably have some internal deadlines for grant submissions you'll need to pay attention to. Sometimes these are completely unrealistic. Like I think IU wanted everything completely done 20 days before the deadline, which it was so unrealistic, everybody basically just ignored. Until, it was like 2 days beforehand, and then they would like freak out on you. But, be nice to your sponsored research office, try to figure out what their deadlines are and work with them. And again, this is obviously a JSON slide with all of the cats. This is super important. Everything I've just said is my opinion or our experience. If you have a detailed question, we recommend that you reach out to Kevin Thompson or one of the other NSF program officers listed on the solicitation. Here's how to find us. Here's our website. If you go to the /CC, that's actually our collaboration page that talks specifically about how we work with the campus cyber infrastructure program. And you're welcome to reach out to us in email as you would please. So, and that is the last of my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask if there are other questions. Or other thoughts. Are there other things that people have done for a previous submission that has worked out for you? Or that you think someone would like to know about? How many of you are thinking about applying for this September deadline? Most of you? Yes, why else wouldn't you be here? Here's a question. Shafak asks, does Epic assist with Area 1 or also open to collaborate on all? So we will work with people on any of these components in the ways I've described. So we can help you with your architecture diagrams. We can help you find your science drivers. You know, we can offer to do training when you get started and going. So Shafak, I'm not sure if that entirely answered your question or not.
Yes, thank you.
And Jen, I just would like to follow up and offer that EPIC resources and EPIC help includes Area 7 and the planning grants also, right? Any of those types of trainings that you just mentioned or workshops that are particularly important also to those planning areas, to really consider using EPIC as a resource for you and your community, identifying your collaborations. Other questions for Jen?
Okay, Jerry says, how long after proposals submitted are decisions made? That's a really good question. And there's no set date. So NSF has a concept of dwell time. So that's how long a proposal sits and dwells between when it's submitted and when you find out an outcome. So the goal is a dwell time of under 6 months for 90% of the proposals. Because if you think about it, so the proposal comes in, it has to go under review, it has to have a panel review, then the program officer has to do a whole bunch of writing stuff, which you guys don't see, and then it goes through a whole bunch of NSF mechanism, and the program officer then has to send out the accepts and then write up something for the declines. So one of the things most program officers hate is writing declines. So what happens when you're a rotator like I was is you often inherit, I did not, but the person who came after me inherited, you know, 100+ declines that just hadn't been sent. Because that's 100+ people you have to say, hey, you're not getting any money. And that's crummy. You know, nobody likes to do that. So often they don't get addressed as promptly as they might. Or if you have a proposal that's kind of on the edge of things, sometimes your dwell time will be longer because as the fiscal year ends, sometimes there's a little bit of extra funding that they're like, well, you know, you were kind of the next proposal to be funded. If we have a little bit of extra funds, when we do closeout and come up with our final accounting, maybe we can squeeze you in. So sometimes that's why you'll be a little bit longer. There is no set, there is a goal of this 6 months for 90%. There is no set anything. If it has been more than 6 months, I would contact the program officer and basically say, do you know when you might be able to give me an update? That's kind of the best you can do. Okay. Jen Oxenford asks, can you speak more about the ways to meet the 20% share time requirement on compute proposals? What are the most strategic ways for an individual campus to satisfy that requirement? So my understanding of that requirement, and again, you should do a sanity check with Kevin Thompson. My understanding is what they would like to see is these campus resources being used and becoming part of the access allocations process and infrastructure. So that would be one way. If you could offer 20% of your campus resources as part of the access process, that would meet that requirement. Another one would be to work with PATH, or also known as the Open Science Grid, where you have a portion of your resource available to that as a cycle sharing resource. I've seen both of those approaches be successful. I'm not saying there aren't others, but those are the two that I'm aware of. And definitely, if you've got an idea that's a little bit more novel than that, I would talk to either Kevin or whoever the program officer that is responsible for that area, which I don't know off the top of my head if that's Kevin or Deep or someone else. Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Chip Byer says, when you respond to comments forwarded by the NSF, are the comments reviewed by NSF and then given back to the original reviewers, or both? Okay, so your proposal goes into a panel and the panelists will evaluate it. They'll write an individual recommendation and then they'll come together and someone will be assigned to write a panel recommendation. And sometimes there are questions of various seriousness. Often the program officer will come back to you and say, here's a list of questions to answer. The program officer will then review those. It does not go back to the original set of panelists, but the program officer was sitting in the panel as they were doing that discussion, but the program officer can't say anything during the panel. They can't weigh in. So the panel gives their recommendation for funding. The program officer says, okay, I also have these questions about this proposal, and they send them to you for feedback. And then you write back and say, okay, here's how we plan to either change our approach or address these concerns that maybe, 15 pages is often not quite enough to be served. So, how can you, and then you go forward with that. So Chip, did that answer your question? That's kind of a how do grants go through NSF process question. All right. Since Chip is not saying anything, I'll assume that's fine. Okay. So someone else weighed in on Jennifer's question and said they bought 17 servers and 3 are going to be used for OSG. So yeah, that would be one way to go forward with that sharing requirement. I think in general, so I'm part of Access, I'm part of the track 4 measurement and monitoring team. And one of the things that the program officers for the Access program have been telling everyone in Access pretty strongly is that they are assuming that since there's not as much funding for Access Central, that some of the resources for it are going to be coming from these campus programs. You can have your own opinion on whether that's a great approach or not, but I believe that the program officer for Access was hoping that some of these resources from these other programs like MRI or CC Star or SIZE has another research infrastructure for computer science and other programs have specific research infrastructure, that they were hoping that some of those resources would get added into Access to have it be a larger program overall. So. Any other questions or comments? All right, Jennifer Oxenford asks, is there someone at Access that campus should contact to firm up a partnership to demonstrate that in their NSF proposal? So that's really challenging because the way that they've structured Access now, when it was Exceed, I would have said, yeah, step 1, reach out to John Towns. He was head of Exceed, and before that TerraGrid. He knew all of the pieces and all of the stuff and could reach out. The way it's set up now, he's still running the Access Coordination Office, but it's not a controlling entity to the other pieces. He's still someone that I would recommend. He would be a point that you could reach out to, and if he's not the right person, he could probably point you to who is. I don't know exactly. I'm happy to do an introduction to you to John Towns if that's helpful. He'll also be at the PERC meeting next week, as will I, if any of you are going to PERC. So, that's a place to catch him as well. So, all right. Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions or comments?
So Jen, I guess I'm going to follow up on Jennifer's question and just maybe part of this too is I think when we ask a question about firming up partnership, I think of that is that a partnership that requires a letter of collaboration? Or because these are kind of named in the solicitation as part of the sharing, that is expected and may not require a letter of collaboration.
I would always include a letter of collaboration. I would, if at all possible, include a letter of collaboration that lays out what you're planning to do with the other party. That way everyone's on the same page. So, I wouldn't just assume that OSG or that PERC or whoever can work with you and it's just assuming that they're there. they've been told that they have to do this. They're not getting, the same way Epic is told, you will be supporting the CC Star program. We don't get extra funding to do this. This is stuff that we do and we're paid to do in general. So we're happy to help. But it's always best to get a letter and to get on somebody's radar and saying, hey, we're expecting to do this and this is the agreement we have. Chip Byers asked, the September 11th deadline is just within the NSF 6-month deadline. That doesn't leave much time to revise and resubmit. So if you are planning to update a March submission, I would reach out to Kevin Thompson today for comments. If you submitted in March and have not been asked for feedback or reviewer requirements, with the timing of the federal funding, this is not an absolute, but I would say it is unlikely you'll be funded in this cycle if you submitted in March and you haven't been asked for reviewer feedback comments yet. I say that in part because the fiscal year ends September 30th. All of the proposals have to be into the part of NSF that makes the proposals by the first week of August, which means all of the divisions generally need to have everything set by about last week. So they've made, 99.9% of their funding decisions by now. So if you have not heard on a proposal you submitted in March, I would reach out to Kevin and say, hey, I haven't heard yet. That probably means we're not getting funded. Could you send me my reviewer comments so that we can figure out what we need to update and address? I honestly don't think that the 6-month change was any distance between them was any kind of foresight, except proposals that come in September. The program officers have way more time to get them through the process than proposals that come in March. You just have you have more time to do panels, you have more time to do feedback. It's just an easier schedule from the program officer's point of view than proposals that come in the March, April timeframe. God forbid I had to run a panel once the first week of July with that stimulus funding, and we had to make all of the awards and in less than 3 weeks, and that was insane. There's a reason why there generally aren't panels for this year's funding in this kind of time frame in this month of the year. So, but with the stimulus money, everything changed. So, but yeah, so for those of you who did submit in March, if you haven't heard yet, I would reach out to the contact points in the solicitation and say, could you give us our feedback so we have time to rework and address? So, although I'd say about 1/3 of the people who had talked to Epic about wanting a letter for submission in March, probably about 1/3 of them didn't go through and decided to wait for the September deadline instead. So, any other questions?
I don't see any more coming into the chat. If folks have any additional questions, feel free to unmute yourself. It's easier to ask than to type.
Okay. I've put my email address back in the chat window. If you've got additional questions or concerns or want to reach out for support from Epic, please do just get in touch with us. We've got a couple months here to get these things through. If you reach out to us after September 1st, we're probably going to have to say, yeah, we need to probably chat for next time. We all believe there's going to be a next time. Nobody knows what the next solicitation is going to look like, though. This changes a ton year by year. So, so with that, I will wish everyone good luck.
Jen, thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for sharing great advice and great information. Please pass along our thanks also to Jason for all the good work that you both do through Epic. We really appreciate it. And the recording will be available here. We'll give it some time to process. Let us know if you would like that, and we'll get it to you directly. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.